everybody, this is Audrey. I wanted to do a quick video about Dataflow, and I got a specific request about Excel using Dataflow to bring Excel data into Dataverse. And so I'm going to walk you through a really brief intro to that with a few heads up you need to watch out for. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to show you my Excel spreadsheet. So my Excel spreadsheet is something that I had in my demos basket. So I keep a whole collection of data that I use for my demos. And one of my favorite collections of data is Northwind Traders. People are familiar with Northwind Traders, and it's a good example of how to work with databases and relationships and all of that. So I've got that data downloaded. This data, therefore, is entirely fictitious. Nothing real about it. It's just for this demo of the Dataflow. Okay. Notice that this has multiple tabs, but what we're going to work with today is the customers table. Now, this customers table could be also used input into our account table in Dataverse, because we have a built-in table as part of the common data model called account, and it has all of this information. So why create a custom table when we already have one? However, we're going to bring them into that default table called account, but I'll also show you how you can bring the data into a custom table that you create. All right. So what's important from an Excel perspective is two important things. One, table format, and two, data types. Okay. So this is a table in this spreadsheet that has records in it. I need to make sure it's a real table. So what I mean by that is I'm going to just put header 1 here, header 2 here, and I'm going to put a number under this one and a number under that one. Even though I typed headers and numbers, this does not make this a table. Okay? In order to make it a table, you must actually use your menu items in Excel and say format as table. When you do that, you will see the header columns will get bolded. You may have filters drop down, but now it's understood as a table. Over here on the right, you can see, it's really small, a little caret at the end of the table indicating where that table ends. This is really important because in Excel, you can put data everywhere, right? It allows you to put data anywhere and everywhere in this workbook. But when you're talking to other data systems, you need to make sure that you have tables in your spreadsheet. And if you drop down this corner, drop down right above your table, you will see all the tables in the workbook. And so you can just go ahead and select them, and it'll go straight to that table. Now, it's important that, what happens when you create a table the first time is that Excel might name it table 1 or whatever you want. But you can always go into here and give it a new name. So I'm just going to type here new customers. And what I'm doing is making a new table, name new customers, right? And now when I drop that down, you will see new customers as well as customers. They're actually the same table, but it's just showing how you can rename, because sometimes having real names is better than using the default table, 1 table, 2 table, 3 table, 4, because when you're connecting to something else, you don't remember what table it was unless there was only 1 table in there. You can also get the list of tables from your data tab in Excel. And in the data tab, you can delete tables, you can rename existing tables, and so on. All right. So now I've got my table. The second thing I have to think about is data types. So thinking of my destination, whether that's a custom table or whether that's a table that exists in Dataverse, whatever kind of table I'm going to, I want to make sure that my columns, the format of those columns is compatible with the format of the destination table. Okay. So for instance, I might have a destination table that instead of having two-letter state names like that they maybe used an option set. Maybe we only support 3 states And so there's a choice list or an option set that says Washington, New York, and California. This data is not compatible with the choice list in Dataverse. So either I'm going to change this to having the choices of the Dataverse list, which we can have that conversation another day, or we'll change Dataverse to match this. One of the two have to happen because otherwise they're not compatible and you'll run into some errors. Okay, so I'm checking to make sure all columns that should be numbers look like you're not something else, and text is text, and so forth. All right, so now I'm going to save that table. That's all I needed. And now we're going to go to Dataverse. All right, so starting at Power Apps, from Power Apps, in the environment where you want to bring the data into. So make sure you check which environment you're in before you start creating your data flow, and that the table you want to bring it into exists in that environment. So just always double check that. Again, in this case, I'm bringing it into a CDM table, so I know the account table is here. All right. So I'm going to click on Dataflows, and then I'm going to delete what I had here. This was me trying to practice. Let's start with no data flows, because that's how you're going to start, with no data flows. And when there are none, you can click Create a Data Flow, or you can click New. So let's click New. And then I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this Demo Northwind Customers. So basically, to remind me that I'm bringing in Northwind customers as a demo. Again, if you're interested in Northwind Traders content, you can find that on the internet. Just do a search. Okay, so I have all these options as to what kind of data I want to bring in. And you notice they even categorize them into groups for you so that you can see what do we bring data into from, what do we bring data from into Dataverse. And you can see all that here. But I know it's the first one, so I'm going to click on Excel. Now at this point, I can drag and drop from my desktop directly into this UI when I click Upload File. If I had the file in OneDrive, then I could use the link to file and just put the link to the file. In this case, it's on my computer, so I'm going to browse to it. And it's this one here called Northwind Traders Table Demo. And I'm going to open that. And it'll upload the file. And it will assume the connection if I have already connected. Now, if I had not connected, I can also connect here too. So it'll tell me you're not signed in. It'll give me a sign in button, and I can sign in. Once I'm signed in and the table is selected, now I can hit next. Now it's looking at that workbook and all the tables that are in that workbook. And this is why it was so important for you to make sure your data was in a table format. Okay. So once you have your data in a table format, it will show up here. And this particular workbook has a lot of tables, okay? I'm going to use this first one here. And you'll notice that as soon as you click on it, it shows you what that table looks like. So you can validate you have the right table and it has the data that you want. If you see that it's missing something that you need, you can go back into Excel and adjust it before you do your import. Or you can wait till after you import and fix the data in the destination. But I like to get it right before I import, and then I'll know that it's imported correctly. So again, this first click is just selecting the table. I can select more than one. So even though it only shows you one at a time, look at these check boxes because that's how many tables you're bringing in. But in this case, I'm only going to bring in one. Okay. Then I'm going to click Transform Data. Those of you that are familiar with Power Query, you totally know what transform data means. This is where you can decide what of this data do I want to keep? Is there something I want to filter out? Do I want to change any of the column formats? Things like that, which can be very helpful. It already does some transformations for you just to keep things neat and clean. And so you can review what's left and decide, what you want. Like for instance, in this case, I don't want the home phone. Click on this one, then shift click on this one. Then I think I can control click on web page. Yes. and notes and attachments, because I don't want any of those. And then I can remove them. Now I could have also removed them one at a time, right? And I'm in the wrong column. That's rows. This is columns. And now those columns are not going to be included in the data flow. So the data flow will ignore those columns that I selected and removed. I can also change formats here, right? But all of my formats are correct. And you can peek at them up here in the corner of each header. Again, those of you familiar with Power Query, you know about this. Once you've transformed everything you want to transform, this is going to be kept in memory in your data flow, which means that every time you repeat this data flow, these same settings will be retained. All right, so I'm going to click next. And now it's going to start looking at these tables, this table or tables in relation to the data where I'm sending it. So I can say load to a new table, load to an existing table, or never mind, don't load, right? Now, this do not load, I think it gets used mostly when maybe you have 10 tables selected, and for some reason in this particular data flow, one of them you do not want to load. That could be the case, all right? But I'm going to load into an existing table, and I'm going to choose my account table. And this is where it's really important to be able to have compatible data, all right? If I click Auto Map over here, it will try and find the different things that are associated with this account, right? So if we use account ID as the key, it's not going to actually, now this is possible. Let me just explain. I got too fast. If the account ID exists in your Excel spreadsheet, now that account ID can be used to map the data. But since I don't have an account ID in my spreadsheet, then I don't actually need to select that. What I do need to select is the different things that I used. All right. For instance, let's do the city first. So let's do city, country, because we see those right away. Might as well do what we see. I don't think we had county. Did I bring in facts? I did. I brought it in. So anything that I selected in my transformation will be shown here. So some of these things are not in that Excel spreadsheet, so I can't select them. Now, where that can sometimes get you in trouble is if the table destination has a required field. If it has a required field, then you're going to run into some problems, right? Because it won't let you create that record without the required fields being filled out. So take a peek at your destination table and jot down whichever fields are required and make sure your Excel spreadsheet has those. Another option you have is to turn off the required fields temporarily and then bring the data in. And I'm only using address 1 data. I think the only thing I need is the email address, the phone, the telephone, which in this case, I happen to know I'm using telephone 3. And did I get everything? I think I got everything that was in the Excel except for the name, and that is under company. All right, I think I have everything. And I'm going to hit next. And now I can decide, do you want this to refresh manually or do you want it to refresh on a schedule? I'm going to refresh manually because I'm probably going to do this one time and not again. But let's say I had a spreadsheet on OneDrive that I wanted to bring into Dataverse weekly for some reason, then I could do an automatic scheduled refresh of the data. All right, so then I'm going to publish. When you hit publish, it'll show you all the data flows that are in that environment, with yours being at the top, and you'll see that its publishing is in progress. And as soon as you see it green, that means that the publishing is good, okay? Publish is good. But it still has to refresh the data. So it moves into a state where it begins to refresh the data. So you watch that refresh. You don't have to sit here and watch it. You can go do some other things. But when you come back here, you'll be waiting for that refresh to be finished. If you get a green check mark, that means nothing went wrong. But if you get something red or some other color than green, then you need to click on it to find out what didn't happen well. And this is a really key to troubleshooting your data flows, knowing how to go to the flow and check for errors. And normally it will tell you exactly what the error is. It's, for example, if my state field wouldn't fit into account because account had an option set or a choice list, it would tell me that that column is incompatible. And so now I can go to fix it. But you notice I have no errors. Everything is good. It's green. And now if I go back to tables here and I go into the account table, you'll see my previous customers in there. But I want you to see the customers from Northwind are all company A. So if I sort this and then maybe go to edit menu so I can see them all, you can see here are all the companies from the Excel spreadsheet. And if I add columns that I used there, such as email, that was one column I used. I also added state, so you can go in there and check. I'm just adding them to the view so you can see. All of that data came in just fine. There was no account number in my Excel spreadsheet, so I shouldn't expect it to give it one, right? And so that's how easy that is. Now, I could have also done load to new table. So let's go back and try a new table situation. All right, so we're going to go back to Dataflows, and we're going to click on New Dataflow and say New Table Demo. Hit Create. And now, again, I'm still using that same Excel workbook, so I can browse it. Now, this is looking at this workbook from this Dataflows perspective. So you can have multiple data flows on the same data source. Just keep that in mind. I'm already connected, so I'll hit Next. And basically, I'm going to do almost the same transformations in the sense that I'm going to decide I don't need some of this home phone stuff. So I'm going to click Transform Data. I don't need to know what their home phone number is because I talk to them at work all the time. So I will delete their home phone, remove column. This time I'm doing it one at a time so you can see the difference. Remove the mobile phone. Don't need that. Remove the web page. Don't need that. Remove notes. Don't need that. And then I don't need their attachments. So these are the columns I'm going to bring into a new table. Now I'm going to say Next, and you notice it defaults to New Table, and we can give it a name. So I'm going to call this My Northwind Customers, and I know that sounds long, but it's because I've done so many of these demos that I want to make sure that I don't do a name that exists already. So I'm just going to make my display name with no spaces. And then we'll auto-generate the primary key, right? And it automatically maps this time, right? Because it's making a new table for us. It tries to pick up the format of these different columns. And the only columns with numbers were the zip code and the ID. So sometimes this whole number can be weird for zip codes, but I'm going to leave it for now and just say okay, because we can always tweak that in Dataverse later. I'm going to leave this manual refresh, and I'm going to say publish. And so now you can see we have two data flows, both of them pointing to the same Excel table. But each of them can be done manually or scheduled. So you can keep that in mind. All right, so now you can see that it's publishing that new data flow. This might take a second or more longer because we are creating a table that didn't exist, as opposed to bringing it into a table that already existed. And so this might take a little bit longer to publish. I'm not 100% sure, but we try to keep this very performant. So it's not really the number of records, it's the architecture behind the scenes that has to work here. After it gets done publishing, we'll watch for the refresh where the actual data values come in. So first we're thinking about schema, and then we go from schema to data values, and that's the two areas of operation here. Okay, we'll just give this a minute. All right, it's published. I actually am keeping this real time so you can see exactly how long this takes. And you can see that it moves straight into in progress, right? And this is where it is, doing the refresh of the data values, bringing the values in from Excel into Dataverse. And this is the most important one where you want to hope that you did a good job in prepping your table and making sure that your table had understandable values and stuff, because now this is going to be your end result, right? We can't wait for this little circle of hope to finish spinning so that we can see our new table. Theoretically, this one I find works 100 times better than the first one, and the reason is it has nothing to do with the software. It's to do with how you understand the schema in your spreadsheet versus the schema in the destination table. I find that the most errors that occur because the schema doesn't match, right? Dataverse wants a number and Excel has a word that's a string, and then you get these errors. But look, we had no problems here. And now if we go to our tables, we should find a brand new table called My Northwind Customers. And this table has all of the data that was in that spreadsheet. So I can add it all here to the view so that you can see email, fax, first name, job title, last name. I don't really need the ID right now. And I don't need created on, but look here, and I can just move this around. But actually, this is only my grid for editing. I want to think about the order of the columns and stuff more so in the views that I build for the table. But you can see this worked really well. So just wanted to leave that for you. Let me know if this is helpful and if you want more Dataflow examples. I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Have an awesome rest of your week.